Okay, so let's begin this lesson by deleting our code from the previous lesson. I no longer need this React element representing an anchor tag, so I'm just going to highlight this whole section and delete it. And let's try out a slightly more advanced version of what we just learned in the previous lesson. Let's say I want to use React and the createElement method to create an unordered list, and in that unordered list, in other words, a UL, I want to store a list item or an li element. So now I want to get more complex than simply nesting text as children. I want to nest React elements as children of other React elements. Okay, so let's start very slowly. Let's start by creating our nested child, which is going to be a list item. So right here, as always, I'm going to take React. On React, we have a createElement method. The first argument can be a string of the HTML element that I want to represent as a React element. So I want a list item, so I'm going to put li. As always, the second argument is an object that represents the props, or equivalently the element attributes that I want to add. And by the way, if you do not want to provide anything for the second argument, you can either provide an empty object or just pass in the JavaScript value null. In this case, let's say I want this li to have a class. So in order to represent that in React, I'm going to define a class name prop. And let's say the arbitrary class I'm going to give this list item will be red list item. All right. As we know, the third argument to createElement is the nested child content. So in this case, if I provide something like a string, it's going to be the nested text between the opening li tag and the closing li tag. So right here, let's say I'm making an unordered list of food items. I'm just going to provide a string of sushi. All right, so now we have a React element. It is representing a list item with a prop of class name that will become an attribute and holding the text sushi inside of it. I'm going to assign this to a constant. I'm going to call that constant list item React element, just so that there's no confusion. It's not a DOM node, it's a React element. And obviously it's not going to appear yet on the page because we're not doing anything with it. Now, I want to use this list item React element as the child of another React element, which is going to be my unordered list. So below, I'm going to declare another const. I'm going to call it unordered list React element. And on the right-hand side of the equal sign, I'm once again going to invoke my createElement method. The first argument is going to be the string representing the element that I want to create. I want an unordered list, so I'm going to use ul. The next argument is that object of props, or equivalently attributes that I want to attach to the ul. So in this case, let's say I once again want to give it a class. So I'm going to provide class name right here and give it an arbitrary class name of red list. And then finally, as always, the third argument to the createElement method is the child content. What do I want to put between the opening and closing ul tag? Well, in this case, I don't want just a piece of text. I want my list item React element above. And so we can include React elements as children of other React elements. So right here, unlike the previous lesson where we passed in just text, I'm going to provide a complete React element referenced by the constant above. Okay, the only thing left to do is we still need to render this to the screen so we see it. So right here, instead of rendering our anchor tag React element, I'm going to reference my unordered list React element, which itself is nesting or housing the list item React element. So when I save this, on the right-hand side, we're going to see sushi appear. Now let's take a look at the actual markup on the DOM. So I'm going to bring up my developer tools, go to elements, and right here in our div with an ID of root, here is our unordered list. You can see it has the class of red list. That's because of the object right here. And its child, if I expand this, is our other React element. Right now, of course, it's represented as an actual DOM node. But you can see the child we provided of the list item React element, that li, now shows up correctly as a child of the ul when we actually transform these React elements and create the real-world DOM nodes. So the key takeaway here is we can nest React elements as children of other React elements. And this can continue all the way down, right? We can have a div. In that div, we can have a section. In that section, we can have a UL. In that UL, we can have an LI. In that LI, we can have a span. And in there, we can have a piece of text. And all that is just going to be elements that store other elements as children, that store other elements as children, that store other elements as children, all the way down. Now, what I'd like to do here as well is I want to console log the unordered list React element before we go ahead and render it. And this is just so it shows up in our console. And if I go here, we're going to see that object, this is our React element. And notice the way that React is going to structure this content. So as always, we have our props property. And in this object, we're going to have a children property, just like we did in the previous lesson. But now, instead of children being a random piece of text like it was, if I expand children, you'll see that it's actually an object representing another React element. This is the nested li, the list item. So here is that React element. You can see its type is li. You can see it has its own props property. And if I expand that, it similarly has its own children property set to the string of sushi, right? So it's just multiple levels or layers or tiers or dimensions of nested children. Our UL React element nests a child of an li React element, which nests a child of a piece of text of sushi, right? And it's kind of easy to reason about this right now because we just have two pieces, but in a real world app, React can totally model 1,000 of these pieces nested within each other. That's really all it is under the hood, all right? So that's all there is to cover in this lesson. We're going to continue chipping away at these ideas in the next one, and I'll see you there.